The story is from Heirloom, the parking feud that finally got a solid solution. Hopefully a good one for you. Sorry for any mistakes as English is not my first language. A few details are changed for anonymity. I work at a niche retail store located in the heart of town. Our customers are dedicated and often travel from afar just to visit us, so having a clear and accessible parking lot is crucial for our business. Unfortunately, our next-door neighbours, a family-run landscaping and garden supply store, have been a thorn in our side for years when it comes to parking. The tension between my boss and the landscaping store owner goes back over a decade before I joined, all over something trivial. I know the landscaper once complained about a tree on our side of the lot, which was unsightly for their customers. It was the pettiest neighbour drama you could imagine, but it festered for years. The final straw came after the Rona, when the physical business in town started picking back up and our parking lot started overflowing with cars again, many belonging to the landscaping store's customers. See, our two parking lots are connected. Ours is about twice the size of his, but the landscaper had decided to reserve almost all his spots for his landscaping vans. Ironically, those vans are rarely even there during business hours. As a result, his customers just parked in our lot, leaving us with few spaces for our own customers. My boss, trying to be reasonable, approached the landscaper with a suggestion. Maybe they could adjust their parking setup to free up a few more spaces for customers and that their vans were welcome to park in our lot, if their lot was ever full. But the landscaper shot down the idea immediately, insisting that it was absolutely crucial to reserve all of those spaces for his vans, even though they were rarely there during the day. The conversation turned heated, ending with my boss threatening to put up a fence to separate the lots and enforce parking. The landscaper, practically daring him, shot back, "Go ahead," probably knowing how expensive that would be. As you can imagine, it ended with both men storming off and not speaking for 2 years. Typical neighbour stuff. Fast forward to recently, and we got a golden opportunity when a parking management company approached us with a proposal. They offered to install automated license plate cameras to enforce parking, allowing us to fine vehicles that stayed beyond a generous 3-hour free window, if they hadn't paid. The setup would be free, we'd get most of the revenue, and they would keep any fines issued. It was perfect, especially since we were losing spaces to freeloaders, wouldn't really impact the customers of the nearby stores, and if anyone had a good reason to park there for longer, then we could give them an extension at our discretion. However, for the cameras to work, they needed to cover both our entrance and the landscaping store's entrance. Being the considerate neighbour, again, my boss had the parking company rep reach out to the landscaper to explain the deal and benefits. But true to form, the landscaper didn't even let the rep finish before kicking him out, making it very clear that, under no circumstances, would his lot become a paid parking zone. Instead of going through the hassle of putting up the necessary expensive fence, my boss had a better idea. Big rocks. One of his construction buddies had a stash of leftover rocks from a recent project and offered to place them for a great price. The parking company even agreed to front the cost, to be repaid through future parking revenue. On Monday morning, before opening hours, one of the buddy's employees, a big, burly guy with arms like tree trunks, arrived with a truck and crane to place the rocks. The rocks were neatly spaced to allow pedestrians to pass with carts, but completely blocked vehicle access. The landscaper stormed out, yelling and trying to intimidate the worker into stopping. But the worker, unfazed, calmly told him to step back for his own safety, which made the much smaller landscaper back down and retreat in frustration. The rocks weren't just a physical barrier. They quickly became a mental obstacle for the landscapers' employees. Their muscle memory kept bringing them into our lot, only for them to realize too late that they couldn't drive through anymore. We watched from our newly installed surveillance cameras just in case the neighbour tried anything, trying not to burst out laughing as their vans ended up awkwardly stuck. They'd have to reverse out and go all the way around to their own entrance, only to perform a series of painful manoeuvres to squeeze into their now much smaller parking area. At one point, we even caught one of their rushing vans clipping a rock while trying to manoeuvre. A little bonus for our viewing pleasure. The next day, the parking company arrived to install the license plate cameras and set up the signage, which took a few hours. Throughout the installation, the landscaper's family members were prowling around our lot, snapping photos and videos as if they were on a mission to find a violation. But the parking company was very professional and had done everything by the book, so there was nothing for them to report. In the meantime, my boss was positively glowing with satisfaction as he helped direct the installation. Here's the best part. We noticed that the neighbour's family had started parking their personal vehicles in our lot, likely out of spite to mess with us. One day, my co-worker saw one of the family members dash out of their store and sprint to their car. We thought it was odd at the time, but didn't think much of it until the following week, when the landscaper's son came into our store looking a bit embarrassed. Apparently, he had accidentally overstayed the 3-hour limit and received a $150 fine. The son practically begged us to waive it, insisting it was just a simple mistake. My boss politely responded, "Oh, I'd really love to help, but it's out of our control now. The parking company handles all the fines." The look on his face was priceless. He left, shoulders slumped, retreating back to their store. Ever since, our lot has been blissfully clear, and our customers have had no trouble finding spaces. Meanwhile, the landscapers have been grumbling as they have a harder time maneuvering their vans, still trying to pretend they're not bothered. As for my boss, he's been smiling a lot more lately. Sometimes, the best revenge is simply letting people get exactly what they asked for. TLDR. Neighbouring landscaping store took up parking, refused to cooperate. We followed their instructions and blocked off our lot and set up parking enforcement cameras. Within a week, they got fined and came begging us to waive it. Boss simply told them it's out of our hands. Now, our lot is clear, and we're happier than ever. This story is a masterclass in passive-aggressive revenge. A retail store owner, tired of a neighbouring landscaper's refusal to cooperate on parking, takes matters into his own hands. He blocks off the shared parking lot with big rocks and installs parking enforcement cameras. The landscaper's family, who had been taking advantage of the parking situation, are left frustrated and embarrassed, especially when they start receiving fines. The retail store owner's response to their pleas for help is priceless. It's out of our hands. The next story is from Sincere Ferret. Gotcha. I used to work in a school as a support educator in a high school scenario, and I got to know a lot of my students quite well. They all very much looked forward to me being in their classrooms, which was a nice, warm and fuzzy feeling because it meant I was doing my job and I was doing it well. One day, midweek, the school was severely short-staffed and the powers that be were having to step in and cover classrooms themselves due to the catastrophic staff shortage. As an education support employee, I was not allowed to be in a classroom on my own with any students because I was not a fully qualified teacher. In the event I got to a classroom and there was no teacher present, I was not allowed to unlock the classroom and let the students in order to keep them safe and together and to ensure we did not disrupt the classrooms around the area. This made my due diligence in performing my child protection duties very difficult in circumstance like this. I had a duty of care to the students, but I also had to adhere to the policy of not being alone in a classroom with students without a fully qualified teacher present. I arrived to a class where the powers that be forgot to roster on a sub-teacher. Knowing the policies of the school and still within the realm of my duty of care to the students, I spoke to the senior class about what had happened. I asked them to please be respectful of the classrooms around us, and if they could work with me while I found out who would be coming to essentially babysit us all, was the way I put it. The students were awesome and just sat down, got their current work out from other classes, grouped together, and got to it. I rang the contact line I was instructed to ring. If this ever did happen, and they said they would send someone straight up, I went and notified the teachers either side of us what was happening, so they knew we weren't just a bunch of unruly delinquents hanging out where we shouldn't be, so no complaints could be made against me. We waited 10 minutes and no one turned up. I rang again. I was told the same thing, and we waited patiently and quietly again. One of the teachers came out to see what was happening, I informed them. No one had turned up, and I had contacted the office a second time and informed the teacher that the office had advised they were sending someone straight up. The teacher did the old skitisk at me, returned to their classroom, and shut the door to block us out. The lesson time was 40 minutes long. By this point, we were 25 minutes into the lesson period. The principal normally does the rounds throughout the high school a couple times a week before the lunchtime let out, and he found us all working quietly and efficiently outside this classroom. He came up and started blasting the students as to why they weren't in class. I quickly stepped in and said, "Hi, sir, you must be our replacement teacher. I have rung the office twice and no one has been sent up to take the lesson." Now, the principal was widely known to be on the downhill ride into retirement, so for him to have to do this was a real inconvenience to him. So he begrudgingly unlocked the classroom door, let us all in, and proceeded to babysit us into the lunch break. Once everyone was released to lunch, I was asked to accompany him to his office to have a word. My line manager was summoned, and I coped a nice big ton of talking to for my actions. I was confused as to why I was getting reamed for the way I handled things because I followed the conflicting policies to the letter. I then asked for clarification and brought up all the written instructions and policies of the school to get the principal to explain to me where I had gone wrong. He couldn't fault what I had done, but because his senior staff had cocked up and not assigned a sub to the class I was with, he had to step in and help out. And because I had been there to instigate that he take responsibility, being the principal of the school and the only qualified teacher in the vicinity, he had a beef with me about that. I requested that the principal and my line manager send me an email with the attached policies highlighting what I should do in the future, and I would ensure it never happened again. They both seemed happy with that, sent me what I had already pulled up for clarification, but this time their names were attached to it. My principal included a step-by-step layout of what was expected of me, even though I did exactly that to the letter anyway. But this time, I had it in writing. I printed it off, laminated it, and carried it with me at all times, plus saved the email just in case. A few of the other support workers learnt through the gossip channel what I had gone through, and I advised that they also ask for what I had in writing, so they knew and couldn't be screwed. I wasn't going to send it to them as we all know how that shit pans out, and it's best to have it directly from the horse's mouth. Cue malicious compliance. Over the coming weeks, the staff shortage was still an issue, and my scenario occurred to 4 of my other support staff friends over various classes and on various days. Each time, one of them experienced no teacher turning up to take the class. They followed the step-by-step protocol set out by the principal to the letter. The final instruction on his email was, if you get to the 20-minute mark of a lesson and no one has turned up, even though you have contacted staff support, please send me an email immediately to document the occurrence so we can monitor how often this happens and then follow up with phone call to inform me you are on your own outside the classroom with the students so I can come and help or find someone to help. The principal was called out to 9 different lessons in the space of 3 days to take classes that sub-teachers had not been supplied to. On the Friday of that week, all support staff were dragged in for a meeting during break. I knew what was coming, so I walked in with my laminated copies of the emails I originally asked for, plus my employment agreement, fair work documents, child protection laws, and training documents and laws surrounding lunch breaks. We all got absolutely blasted for the amount of times we had contacted the principal in the past week for help with classrooms not covered by full qualified teachers. We all just sat there and coped it, and then we were asked if we had anything to say for ourselves. Of course, the principal's management team was not under fire for their blunders, as this all came from their mismanagement and not doing their jobs properly. I stood up, phoned the support line for employees. With the union rep, got someone on a loudspeaker. I knew the conversation would be recorded at the union's end, and I authorized it to be recorded as I wanted the whole glorious thing captured so no recourse could happen to any of us. I explained what the situation was and invited the principal to chime in at any time to provide his facts on the matter. I provided the proof of the principal's email, I provided my employment contract, which was the same for all people in my position, that stated hours to work and therefore breaks to be had. I provided the child protection laws and policies of the school. I stated we had complied with them and exercised our due diligence in the spirit of managing the situations in the spur of the moment, and all the other support workers agreed we had. I provided the child protection training documents we are forced to do at the start of every single year. It's mandatory, and we cannot work in a classroom without having completed it, even though once it's done most staff ignore it. I also said that we had progressed 38 minutes into our 40-minute break and would now all be required to take that break or be paid overtime at double overtime rates, as it had been so many hours since our last break, which invites additional penalty rates. The union asked the principal to make a statement, which he did, and then we ended the call. The principal, upper management of the school, and my manager were all left absolutely stunned. We had managed to single-handedly get on record that the school was remiss in child protection. Upper management were not doing their jobs in rostering staff onto cover classes. Staff abuse for following all policies and procedures to the letter, and to top it all off, the school had to give us all our lunch breaks in the afternoon, which ended up being the rest of the day because the meeting went well over break time. So in good faith, we all got to leave early on the Friday afternoon, get paid for it along with our overtime rates, and we all went on strike the following Wednesday when we all knew no exams were on. And our absence would not affect our students, just to send a message to management that this whole thing was on their heads. Our absence was felt, but since we were not supposed to look after students without a fully qualified teacher around, they ended up having multiple classes with no supervision whatsoever on the Wednesday because all us support workers were not there to wrangle the masses. This caused more management to be exposed for not doing their jobs. The following school term, management got shuffled around and relocated to try get things back on track. If you don't home educate your kids, I suggest you do. This is a more common occurrence than most people think. This story is a wildly entertaining and relatable tale of a support educator's experience in a high school. The OP's clever use of malicious compliance to expose the school's mismanagement and hypocrisy is a joy to behold. Then it leads to the absurdity of bureaucratic red tape and the importance of holding those in power accountable. The OP's determination to follow the school's policies to the letter is a masterclass. The story's outcome is satisfying, with the principal and upper management being held accountable for their mistakes.